Hello and welcome back to Chaos in the Paddock. I'm your host, Chiara, and joining me today is Fleur. Welcome back on the podcast. You haven't been here for a hot minute.
It's been so long and I'm so happy to be back, honestly. It's been far too long, I think.
And what a race to come back to, because I honestly don't even know what to say other than that was pure chaos. Hell, I guess, for a lot of the drivers. I don't know.
I actually, when you said, let's debrief Qatar together, I thought, oh yeah, that'll be nice and chill. I did not expect the chaos that I just watched. I mean, it was great for me. All my favourite drivers survived the hell that broke loose. But my God, did some teams leave there absolutely shafted.
Listen, my favorite drivers were victimized by Qatar. I mean, okay, Carlos, yeah, we'll get to him later. Lando, big one. I think the biggest survivor of the Qatar Grand Prix was Max Verstappen, who was back on the podium, like first place podium, for a very long time. When was the last time he won a race? Do you remember?
To be fair, he won, what was it, Brazil? He won Brazil. So not crazy long ago. But, like, the first time he's won from, like, the front since the beginning of the season. Like, it's been ages since he's actually been at the front and then finished at the front. And I'm going to say he won from pole because he should have been on pole, not going to lie.
Oh my goodness. Let's start with that one, I guess. So during qualifying, and I do have to admit, you guys, I did not see qualifying because I was busy living it up and working the role model concert. I don't know if you listened to them. You should, or to him. But yeah, I was busy and there was no signal inside, so I couldn't actually pull up the results. So I had to go out blind, and then as soon as I saw, oh, this was the results, I was like, oh, okay. Max on pole, and then when I got home, it was midnight. That's when I saw the next notification saying that he got a penalty and that he lost pole. So what happened?
That was kind of where I think that FIA's harshness began this weekend, because, like, qualifying was pretty run-of-the-mill qualifying. There wasn't any, like, huge issues throughout it. It was pretty normal. Max, like, did a fastest lap, but there was an incident with him and George where both of them were on cool laps, but Max was going, like, extra slow because, I don't know, I think he'd let two cars go by and he was on the racing line, but he was going really slowly, and George had complained about it. And normally, like, if George was on a fast lap and then Max was on the racing line, sure, give him a 3-place grid penalty or a 5-place grid penalty, like you usually do. But both were on slow laps, so felt kind of rogue for me to give him a 1-place grid drop.
Yeah, that's the thing that got me the most. I was sat in my car and I was like, what is this? Like, I've never seen this in my whole life.
Like, give him 3 or give him 5 or don't give him 1 at all. Like, what is the point of giving him a 1-place grid drop? So I consider Max holding on to that pole because that was dumb, and then he led into the first corner anyway. So it was
I'll give
not
George
necessary.
one thing. I'll give him one thing. That man can argue himself out of anything, I feel like.
He is also always there when someone else gets a penalty. He is always there to reap the rewards. I feel like every single time he's had, like, a good result, like a really good result, or like a surprise podium, it's because someone, like, ahead of him has gotten a penalty or, like, crashed together, and they've always been, like, really rogue events. Like, he is always the man to capitalise on other people's downfall, and I respect it. I respect it a lot.
That. Austria.
Yeah.
Remember, so when Lando and Max had their little incident over there, like, George and then swooped in and Toto's like, you can win this, George, go!
That was so funny. And in Baku as well, I'm pretty sure, when Carlos and Perez crashed, I'm pretty sure George ended up on the podium. So he just kind of, like, ends up on podiums because of other people crashing or getting penalties, and I respect it a lot. Put yourself in that position. So,
to be fair, I think he's had a lot more luck this season, because if you look back on the things that happened last season, even in Las Vegas, remember he crashed it into the wall.
Oh my God, yeah. I think he's
he won.
I also think he's been a just more impressive driver this season. I think obviously you have the comparison to Lewis, but like how true is that comparison? Because we know Lewis has hated this car all year, whereas Russell's been a lot more comfortable in it. But like he's been consistent. He's put that Mercedes in places it doesn't feel like it should be. He's had like really good results this season, I'd argue. So I think for me this season has been like a real step up for George Russell from like past seasons.
I have to agree with that because last year most of my comments on George Russell were the lack of maturity. So I think he's gained that now and he's a little bit more calm and collected. He's still a tattletale, that's for sure.
But I love that about him.
Maturity. Yeah, exactly. I love that he goes, "Oh my God, Lando did this. Oh my God, Joe did that."
I love that he has the rule book. He literally has that rule book out on his lap as he's driving. He's checking the rules.
There's a reason why he represents the drivers, though. So, I mean, yes, exactly. He will tell on you if you make a mistake or if he thinks you made a mistake. But that man can really represent. And I think you can tell that with, the statement that came out that he apparently wrote.
That statement was actually iconic. I still think about that frequently. That was amazing.
But yes, George's complaints led Max Verstappen to lose pole position by 1 place, which is interesting. But you know what? I think the Qatar Grand Prix kind of showed us the cracks within the FIA. I think that's a good thing to start with.
I definitely think so. I think it showed... I don't even think it showed the cracks in the FIA, because I think we knew they were there, and we've seen them. I think it was like water bursting through a dam. Like, we saw the cracks earlier in the season, and this was, like, embarrassing for the FIA. Because, first of all, you have Mohammed Ben Sulayem's comments earlier about how, like, the drivers don't need to know about the, like, changes we make. Like, that's not their, like, job. Clearly it is, because why did it take 4 laps and 3 drivers running over a piece of debris before you're putting out a safety car? Because clearly it was an issue, because Valtteri Bottas then ran over it and then 2 drivers got a puncture. So clearly it needed to be cleaned up. It's not something that you're like, oh, well, it was off the racing line and we didn't know if anyone was going to, like, actually hit it. Like, it was going to be an issue. And then to, like, just then to have a safety car after 3 drivers have got car damage from it. And then as well, obviously Lando got his stop and go penalty for, like, not slowing down in the yellow flags. And, like, yeah, I agree that Lando deserved a penalty because safety is really important, and if you're not slowing down in yellow flags, then that's a huge safety breach. But equally, it should have been a safety car. Like, you preach safety, and then the FIA aren't practicing safety. So, like, yes, the Lando deserved a penalty, but arguably the FIA deserved a penalty too. So, because that was not safe. I think it was dumb. And then we had, like, 10 penalties to other drivers throughout the race. Granted, a lot of them were deserved, because what was that race and why was everyone driving into each other? But it seemed like a very, very chaotic race for the FIA.
I think so too. I mean, Las Vegas was the first race that Rui Marquez, so essentially the person who came in and is now taking over, and Qatar was the second. And I thought, okay, Las Vegas was just F1. They didn't really have the supports. I mean, next season we will have the F1 Academy on there. Also, Abby Pulling won the F1 Academy Championship, so congratulations to her. That is definitely worth a mention. That is amazing, but sadly race 2 got cancelled today, so we couldn't see any more racing from them. But we will see more of that in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, that was upsetting that race 2 got cancelled, but like I think it shows why it's important that they're moving around the F1 Academy calendar next year, because when you have so many things on a race weekend, you just don't have the time to reschedule a race if something goes wrong in a race before. Like, if it had just been F1 Academy and F1 with Porsche maybe, you would have been able to have a longer gap or reschedule the race for later, but because you also have F2, you wouldn't have that. And I mean, we've seen past race weekends where we've had F3, F2, F1 Academy and F1. Like, it sometimes gets insane. And I think I'm glad that they're moving it so that a lot of F1 Academy will only be on F1 weekends.
I don't know if you remember Barcelona where everyone was racing.
Literally don't. It's
At the
literally.
pressure of me being there and the motorhome burning.
Also remember. I also remember the Belgian Grand Prix when I ran to the grandstand at like 8 a.m. in the morning to watch F2 just to have it cancelled and then rescheduled for the evening when I couldn't even stay and watch it because I had to get the last train back to my hotel. And then the next day when I raced to watch the F2 race, and then my two favourite drivers crashed out before I even got to my seat. So
Oh, I remember that because I was like, is she okay?
I was running. I was like, I could hear they're on the formation lap right now. I sat down on my seat as they were coming round, and Ollie and Pepe had crashed into each other. And I was like, they hate me. They hate me. This is really rude. So
But
that was
he
awful.
won today. Like
He
he won
did
the sprint.
yesterday.
He won
Yeah,
yesterday. That's the
he
one
did.
thing I saw that I was like, okay, Flair's gonna be happy about this one. Sad to have missed that one. But
Yeah.
that was an exciting race. I did rewatch some of the highlights. I read the reports that my lovely people in Pit Debrief have written because I was not there. And I have to say, I thought F2 was gonna take home the prize for being the more chaotic event of the week.
I
But I stand corrected. I think this was worse.
I didn't think it was going to be a competition because like F2 is usually insane, and then you watch F1 and you're like, oh, I wish F1 was more like F2. But no, no. F1 went, hold my drink. I'm actually just going to show you something real quick. Because that was crazy. Because, like, F2 was insane enough. Like, you had cars spinning, you also had multiple safety cars. Like, there was a lot going on. But F1 really said, give me a second. Let me show you something. And you know what? I appreciated it because like the chaos is what I love in F1. And those races where you have insane things happening, I think are more fun. So I enjoy them.
I agree because I was glued to my seat. I was, sat in my little corner over there and I was like, ooh, cool. Because this was one of the first races where I got to just sit and watch and, think about this podcast instead of having to write something because I was on feeder duty this morning. But I do have to note something in the F2 race. Today was the first day that I really saw and realized why Sauber went for Gabriel Bortoleto. And I don't know
You
if
get
you
it?
saw the same thing, but just for the people who don't watch the feeder series actively, maybe, Gabriel Bortoleto is in championship contention with Red Bull, junior Isaac Hadjar. And at this point, half a point separates them from the championship, doesn't it? And Gabriel Bortoleto made a few mistakes today that didn't necessarily cost him his championship, but they gave him a 10-second. Was it a 10-second or a 5-second penalty?
5 seconds.
Sorry, a 5-second penalty. And Gabriel Bortoleto was fighting for his life to make that time to get into the point so that he wouldn't lose, that much place. At the end of the
And I will
day, Paul Aaron won, and then Gabriel Bortoleto and Isaac Hadjar are still gonna fight.
And I will also say that Gabriel avoided a worse result because
Oh my
going
god, right.
him diving out of the pit lane, which got him the 5 second penalty, was because obviously in F2, for those who don't know, you can't pit under a virtual safety car. So if he'd gone into the pits, it wouldn't have counted. So he would have had to do a second pit stop. So he saved himself like 30 seconds rather than just a 5 second penalty. So it was actually a very smart decision from him, even though he did get a penalty for it. And I also there is half a point separating them, and if Isaac Hadjar loses, he will be ruining the sprint race because in the sprint race he was second and then he spun and he ended up being fourth and off the podium. And I know the sprint race is less points, but obviously it's half a point currently. It's gonna be a close result, chances are. And if there's only a few points behind them, I would have sleepless nights thinking about that sprint race if I was Isaac Hadjar, because he had the opportunity to get ahead of Bortoleto and he didn't manage it.
That doesn't mean that Hadjar is not a good driver. I think Hadjar is a phenomenal
No.
driver. I just think at this stage, maybe Bortoleto has a little bit more of the maturity, because you can see that Hajar kind of makes like the silly, I don't want to say emotional mistakes, but it's the same thing when you're driving a car on the highway. You know, you have to be careful and not get phased by other drivers around you. And I think it's those little things that can cost you these points. And you have, I mean, I'm sure that if it was a reverse position, Hajar would have been doing the same thing that Bortoleto was doing. I just don't know if he would execute it the same way as Bortoleto did, calm, you know, with class. I'm not saying
I
he's
think
classless, but
it honestly is one of the praises that Bortoleto gets a lot, is being so level-headed. And you see,
yeah.
like Ollie Behrman gets the same praises, like for both being very cool, calm, collected. I also think an important detail here is Bortoleto, as much as this F2 championship is important to him, he does have that F1 seat already guaranteed. So that means you can be calmer about the result of this season. Because of course he'd love to go into F1 as a back-to-back champion of F3 and F2, because that's such a prestigious group to be a part of. But at the end of the day, if he does lose it, he still has that F1 seat. Whereas Isaac Hadjar, every result is vital for him because he is on that list of potential Red Bull replacements. And it is a competitive list. So he doesn't genuinely know if one good performance or winning the F2 title will put him higher up on that list or not. So for him, it is like fight or flight. Like it's all or nothing. And that is kind of like the right way for him to play this championship. But at the same time, it means that I feel like he makes some more mistakes or makes more impulsive decisions. But it just kind of comes from their circumstances in the championship right now.
I think it's a very Red Bull Junior thing to do. I don't know if, let's say I have a child and my child, you know, can pick from any driver academy they could choose from. I would refuse to let my child go into the Red Bull one, because I think they're teaching their drivers to have this like fight. I mean, sure, it's like a very fight or flight, survival to the fittest kind of academy, I guess, because if you're not performing, like look at what happened to Casper. He got dropped. Who do we have to replace? Like who replaced Casper? Was it Solov now? Because I know Solov recently announced
Yeah.
he is joining the Red Bull Academy.
It's hard because I praise the Red Bull Academy a lot because they're one of the few academies that you see really utilize their junior program. Like the fact that out of the like 4 drivers being discussed for the Red Bull seats, all of them are, other than Colapinto, like junior drivers. That is like a very important thing because you see a lot of like junior programs not get used. Aston Martin, most useless junior program ever. Why does it exist? I stand by that. That was Felipe Drugovich.
They have one for a second. I was just like,
They created it. This is one of my like most irritating things, right? They created it for Felipe Drugovich. It didn't exist before him. They created it for him, and then he has sat there for the last like 3 years, 2 years, and just waited. And he was being interviewed by Crofty. I think it was Crofty who was being interviewed by, or Ted, before the weekend, and he's talking about like Kimi and Ollie and like these drivers who aren't winning F2 being moved up to F1, and you can tell that he's like salty about it, like in a endearing way. Like I don't blame him. It must be like really difficult when you won the F2 championship by miles and now you're seeing drivers who are like 6th and 15th in the championship moving up to F1. But like he did it to himself. Why did you join the Aston Martin junior program? You know there's no seat there anytime soon. Like, Fernando Alonso will be there till the day he dies, and Lance Stroll is Lance Stroll. Like, I will never understand that. So I think out of all the junior driver programs, Red Bull is one of the best, but they do have a tendency to have drivers who are more impulsive, seem to be more aggressive in either driving style or just the way they talk on the radio. Whereas I'd say, like, Ferrari's driver academy is almost the opposite. Like, they PR train those poor children to, like, an inch of their lives, to the point where they're, like, the most polite, like, level-headed people on the planet. Charles Leclerc, Ollie Behrman, very good examples. Like, have you ever seen Charles Leclerc? Sure, he'll criticise Ferrari on the radio, but by the time he gets to that media pen, Yeah, it was a team decision, guys. We'll talk about it later. No, it's fine. Everything's fine, guys. Like, he is so well
I
PR'd.
was gonna say, Fleur, are you forgetting what happened last
No,
week?
but it's a different scenario. On the radio, he'll be mad, but in the walk it takes for him to get to that PR pen, he's back on the
Already.
media train. Yeah, and that's like I think that's the
Sylvia
difference
has to
between
give
some of the
me
driver
tips on how to
academies.
train my drivers. That would be like, she
Honestly,
should come out with a book. I'll do it. I'll read
she
it. I'll
honestly,
train my
she should.
guys.
I would read that so quick because she's insane. Like her media strategy, I need to see it. I need to see how she gets these drivers to do everything she gets them to do.
Mine likes to run people over with his e-scooter, so I guess I need her.
Honestly,
I'm serious. He likes to ram people over with his mountain bike, with his suit. Because here's the thing with my driver. He enjoys not driving his car sometimes. I'm okay with that because he likes to stay fairly close to the track. My problem is the way he goes about things. I have a ton of videos on my phone of him on a bike with all of his racing gear like lugged on his back and dragging his suitcase whilst biking, hitting people and going,
I love
oopsie, oopsie.
honestly iconic. Can't like that seems like something Lance Stroll would do. I'm just gonna put it out
Yes.
there.
But I have to commend my drivers for giving good interviews and showing, authentic emotions while Lance Stroll gives us 27 seconds of his time.
That was very true.
We have proof of that. He only gives us at least 27 seconds of his time. The highest we've gotten so far was like 3 minutes of him speaking.
I love it. I love it.
But yes, speaking of Lance Stroll, I don't even know where to start because here's the thing, you guys. Like Fleur and I, like I said, we came here with no plan. We wrote down a couple of notable incidents that happened in the race, but essentially it was so chaotic that we don't really know where to start. So I guess let's start with like the first half. That makes the most sense because that was already eventful as it is. But during the start of the race, I was like, okay, this is going to be a clean start. Everyone has had a clean start so far. What happens? George Russell lost positions. Max yeets to the front, and Lando comes in and is like, bye. He was literally like, bye, George. Bye.
He almost got the lead. He was so close to taking the lead, actually.
But Max wasn't gonna give him the lead, especially not after that one grid place penalty. So that was for sure. But what happened in the back?
The back is always chaotic. The back actually scares me. Like, there's nothing worse than when your, like, favourite driver qualifies, like, near the back, and you're like, oh, now he is to start next to Lance Stroll. No, I'm joking. Now he is to start next to, in that chaos, like, of all of those drivers. Because, like, what even happened? You talk me through it, because it's a blur. What actually happened? Was it... I'm not even going to try and guess.
I think what happened was I think Nico Hülkenberg had an issue and then hit Esteban Ocon, who then took Colapinto with him. I'm gonna have to rewatch that because it happened so fast. But there were definitely 3 cars involved, and then Hülkenberg got a puncture.
Yeah, I remember now. Because Hülkenberg took the corner and either locked up or had an issue, then drove straight into Esteban Ocon, who then drove straight into Franco Colapinto.
He swerved and then he hit Franco, and then Franco went into the gravel.
Yeah, and then they all
kind
just
of flew even. I don't know if you saw that video, but he was like, yep.
Yeah, it was not good. Poor Franco Colapinto and Paul Williams mechanics again. I really feel bad for them.
I feel like we need to give them like a big bottle of wine. I don't know if you saw.
I feel like
do you remember my huge human-sized bottle of champagne that I ordered?
Yes, I do.
I need to order that for the Williams.
Hard to forget. I feel like they need something more than that. I feel like they deserve
like a vodka.
Yeah. Just buy one of those massive bottles and then fill it up with vodka. I think you got to drink it.
Everybody gets a Stanley cup full of vodka.
I like that idea. I think that's a great plan.
I mean, the car was not as damaged, though, I think. I hope. It still looked quite intact. I think the only thing that stopped him was he ended up in the gravel and he kind of flew. So
Yeah, I think
I'm just
he
hoping.
was in the gravel and I think he had a puncture or something, so then he couldn't get out. I think was the only issues. So
I'm
hopefully it
hoping.
shouldn't be too bad because apparently they only have one nose cone left to get them till the end of the season. Um, so saw that tweet today. I don't remember where I saw it, but I swear I saw something that said they only have one nose cone for the both drivers for the rest of the season. So let's hope no one else crashes, guys. Because there's
I'm
no point in
very
putting money
done.
into it. There's only one race left. There's no point. So Williams is honestly running on vibes. And even those
Are
are
they
running low.
though?
I didn't say they were good vibes, but they're running on vibes.
Yeah, they
They're just
deserve the
not great
world right
vibes.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, not great vibes at the moment. And not even Franco's positive energy can like help that. I mean, it wasn't his fault. He couldn't do
No,
anything
that's
about
the
it.
worst
He got
part.
caught in the mix.
That's actually the worst part because I'm a strong petitioner for Franco's permanent space on the grid, and every time
Yeah,
he
but
doesn't finish a race, that gets harder to fight. So,
that is true. That gets. Well, the thing is, you can see that he is a really good driver. I'm not saying that he's bad and that he doesn't deserve it, or, maybe he should go back to F2 for a little bit and then he can get pulled up because where are you going to put him?
yeah,
Are you just
this
going
is
to
my.
end pull up sorry, you're going to end Duhan's contract all of a sudden before he even starts and then put
So
Colapinto
bad.
in?
I
I
think
wouldn't put it past Flavio.
I honestly wouldn't either, but I just thought that would have been so mean. Like that would have been so harsh. No, I think he'll just go. I just think he'll be Williams' reserve driver until there's a space for him somewhere, whether that be with Cadillac, or whether that be if something happens at Williams and a seat opens up, or if a seat opens up elsewhere. Watch him get the Aston Martin seat before Felipe Drugovich does.
I don't know if that's gonna sit right with me. Actually, no, Fleur, you know what? That's fine, because then you and I will be there to comfort Drugovic, and we'll be like, there,
I love Felipe. It's actually such a shame because I
something
do
through.
love him and I advocate for him to get an F1 seat every time there's one available. But he just like, why Aston Martin? Why did you have to pick their junior driver program? It's so bad because if he'd picked any other one, he'd literally have a seat on the grid right now because
He
literally
could have been in the Williams right now instead of
literally
Colapinto.
every other driver program has put their rookie in the car. Like, he could have been an Alpine junior, he'd have that Alpine seat right now. If he'd been a Ferrari junior, he could have been a talk for the Haas seat. If he'd been a Red Bull junior, he'd be in that discussion. Williams junior, literally the only junior or the only like rookie not to have been talked about for an F1 seat is the Aston Martin juniors. So,
You forget that they exist. That's the
you do.
that's the very sad thing, because Drugovic is good. I
And Jack
know he's.
Crawford is also a Aston junior.
I forgot
People
about
forget
them
about that.
too.
Yeah, people forget about them.
See, that says a lot. If I forget about this, and I see Jack a lot, because obviously he's also now Andretti Formula E's reserve
Hmm.
driver, and the Formula E season is going to start literally
Oh my
next
god.
week.
Oh my
It's
god, actually, I forgot
actually
that was starting next week. Oh no.
I forgot for 1 second as well, because now we're gonna have to double reports because Oh, by the way, you guys, in case this is your first time ever listening to this podcast, Fleur is also a motorsport journalist and covers the exact same things I do. So
Oh
we're going to be
yeah.
dying because we have Formula E, we have F1 Academy, we have Formula 2, and then we have F1.
Yay. I can't wait till next season when I'm also covering IndyCar as well. That's gonna be so much fun.
I forgot about that because I will be doing that too.
I'm actually gonna die. I'm actually just gonna give up. At some point, I'm just gonna shut down. How am I supposed to do this? I don't know. Vibes. We'll run on vibes. But the benefit is like the beginning of the Formula E season after this weekend or after next weekend, we'll have no F1. So it will be only Formula E. And then it's quite nice because our winter break, like, like off season is filled with racing, so it has its benefits. It has its benefits. Being incredibly busy does have an upside.
You know what? Speaking of FE, I think Drugovic should think about doing that in the meantime, because he's sometimes just sat there doing nothing, and that's what bothers me. I mean, yeah, he does WEC, but
He was offered a bunch of seats in a bunch of different series after he won F2, and then I think the year after as well, and he turned them down because he wanted to make sure he was in the best position to take an F1 seat if it came along.
not with Aston Martin.
Because obviously there's the whole shtick that's like, if you leave the reserve driver scene and you are driving in a different category, even if you are still a reserve driver, will you be forgotten about? And like, yeah, I get that, but you're at Aston Martin. You know, you're there. They made that reserve driver program and like their junior driver program for you. I think you're the first one to come to mind if they need like someone to fill the seat, you know? So I think he should have taken a seat. I can't remember which seats he was offered, but I'm pretty sure he was offered an IndyCar test and like maybe an IndyCar seat. Don't quote me on that because I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure an IndyCar team. I think Chip Ganassi wanted him before Marcus came along, but he didn't take it. And obviously now I think he's just done an IndyCar test, but it's like, babe, you could have been doing this for like 2 years now. So that always annoys me.
Meanwhile, Stroll is here being Stroll, getting 10-second penalties for a collision with Alex Albon that I don't even remember what. When did this happen? Because I left for 5 minutes. I don't know if you saw this in like our group. I left for 5 minutes because I was making dinner. I come back and I keep on seeing like penalties after penalties after penalties. And I think you have the list of all the penalties. So ladies and gentlemen, you know what? Listen to Fleur read out the list of penalties that came out today.
Okay, so here we go. We had George Russell, 5-second time penalty for safety car infringement. Lando Norris, 10-second stop and go penalty for failing to slow under yellow flags. Alex Albon, 10-second time penalty for causing a collision with Kevin Magnussen. Liam Lawson, 10-second time penalty for causing a collision with Valtteri Bottas. Lance Stroll, 10-second time penalty for causing a collision with Alex Albon. Lewis Hamilton, drive-through penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Why? Why? Also, it's the fact that Alex appears twice. Like, K-Mag was up in there. Like, he was also in a few, like, suspected incidents that didn't get, like, penalties in the end. And poor Valtteri Bottas, innocent bystander. But my favourite moment was Lance Stroll wanting to retire the car and then forcing him to go out to serve his 10-second penalty just to then bring him in and retire the car.
Well, that means they won't get the penalty in Abu Dhabi.
Exactly. It was smart, but it made me giggle.
Did that last year, remember in Mexico, he went out again to do. We were all so confused. We were like, "What's he doing? Is he?"
But it wasn't like Lance. Like Lance just came into the pit, served the 10-second penalty, and then went back out. This was like Perez came out like 10 laps later. That was insane. That was actually crazy. I forgot about that.
I didn't because I was writing that report, I think, and I was like, I don't know how to write this. What do I say?
Just give up.
So then I'm like, I don't know what to do. Why is he back out? What is this?
That was so rude.
I genuinely thought he just had to pit and then, go back and race. But no, it was just him serving his penalty for yeeting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, so those were the penalties we had.
So we had a lot of penalties.
So many.
3 safety cars.
3. Oh my
4
God,
DNFs or 3 DNFs?
Definitely 4, if not more than that. I swear it was 5. Maybe it was 4. I genuinely don't remember.
The first one was like Esteban and Colapinto.
Albon,
eventually
Albon, Colapinto, Esteban, Hulkenberg, Stroll. 5.
The listeners are probably thinking, like, did they even watch the race?
It was 5. I was right. It was Ocon, Colapinto, Stroll, Perez, Hulkenberg. I had, in fact, forgotten about Perez.
I do have to admit, though, I think that this race weather-wise kind of made it a little bit more bearable to watch, because last year my struggle was, the heat and everything that was going on around that, because obviously Logan Sargent wasn't feeling well. As soon as, the top three were out of their cars, you can see them just lying on the ground, drinking a lot of water. Mr. Charles Leclerc did not have any water again, as you mentioned.
That poor man. Literally 3 times every season, he has to have his water broken, and it's always in the hottest or the toughest race conditions. And I stand by that, and I don't know what happens to him. But
The
yeah,
thing is, I think the safety cars made it bearable. David Coulthard actually said this on the F1 TV broadcast. He said, "Oh yeah, I think the fact that or no, not the F1 TV broadcast. He said it on the what is that? The top three, quick interviews before they go to the podium in the cool down room. Oh my god." He was like, "Yeah, I think the safety cars made it more bearable because then they got to cool down and kind of like, calm down 3 times in between." So
yeah,
that
Jensen said the same thing. While everyone was going up for their interviews, he said that Charles was probably actually really thankful for all those safety cars, and if there hadn't been those safety cars, it would have been a lot worse. But yeah, I think when you compare it to last year, the need to move it to November becomes so clear. Because I mean, even after the sprint race yesterday, like in Lando's interview, he was like, yeah, it's a really tough track, like my neck already hurts. So even beyond like the heat aspect of it, Qatar is such a physically demanding track that when you add the heat on top, it just becomes like unbearable. And I remember like Esteban was like throwing up in his helmet, like Lance was passing out in the corners. Like last year was insane. Like actually, like I was surprised no one
abuse.
crashed.
I
But
think
honestly,
that's what it was. It was abuse.
it was actually crazy. I remember like finishing that race and being like, I'm honestly surprised there wasn't like a bigger, more dangerous incident with how like unwell all the drivers were feeling. So I think this weekend was just so much better. And actually, the wind, the conditions were really conducive for like fun racing because the tires were so hard to heat up that you had more like strategy coming into play and like drivers purposefully staying out of each other's way to make sure their tires heated up properly. You had a lot of that sort of strategy being brought in, which I quite enjoy. So I think it just made for better racing all round. And obviously safer conditions.
One thing I did want to note on is the fact that now that they're adding more races to Qatar, I think the track is going to be better because it's not being used. Do you know what I mean? Like that puts in something big as well. So the fact that you have the Porsches racing there, and now you had F1 Academy, and then you had F2, it wasn't left up to F1, to keep on breaking in that track. And I find that highly interesting because when we were watching F2, you can see, even though it's happening so fast on our television, you can see the tires degrading so bad that I was worried. Like Dino was like, "Oh yeah, I don't have the front two tires anymore." And I'm like, no, 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 no.
I mean, you saw it even in the F2 sprint race, where like Isaac Hadjar obviously got ahead of Ollie, but he was on the medium compound and they just disappeared. And like by the end, yeah, he ended up fourth and he spun because his tyres were that like destroyed. And like Victor Martins went from being third, I can't remember where he ended up, but he dropped very quickly through the ranks because everyone else was on hard tyres. Like it's one of those tracks that's tyre like management is so important, and I love stuff like that. And yeah, I love it when there's multiple series going on. I think it works really well for F1, and it means when we get to F1, the racing's often better because the track's been rubbered in a bit. So the cars can go out there and just push or like just figure things out instead of like trying to get the track rubbered in first. But yeah.
But it also poses a problem when a Porsche crashes into the barrier and breaks it and cancels the F1 Academy race.
Yeah, cancels F1 Academy and delays F2. Yeah.
I woke up for this. Let's just take note about my night last night. I got home at around midnight, or like, 1:45, I guess. And I woke up really early to make sure, that I'm ready. My draft is, up. I always prepare a little draft when I'm doing a race report that, like the first paragraph, a possible working title, and now I woke up for nothing. I texted Tiana and I was like, Tiana, we woke up for nothing. And it was sad.
Yeah. I was watching it, but like I was doing work, I was doing schoolwork, and I like had it on, and I was like, oh, I'm so ready to watch this, I'm so excited. And then it was like, it's cancelled, and I was like, oh. And also Dorian Pan was fuming that it was cancelled when they showed her, like she was arguing with like the Mercedes employees and stuff, which is so understandable because like it must be so annoying when you've had like such a good race weekend. And the second race, you know who I feel really sorry for is Alicia, the wild card. Because to come all the way to Qatar for like this opportunity, which is a really great opportunity, and then not get the second race must be so frustrating.
And she was doing so well.
She was doing really well.
Like, she was one of the wild cards where I was like, okay, she's got pace. She could be a contender for a seat, you know, in F1
But she's
Academy.
doing
We have people leaving.
Yeah, she's doing insanely well in, I think it's GB4 she's racing in at the moment. Like she's doing really, really well in it. And I was in the F1 Academy presser, and she was saying that like her aim is to get a seat in F1 Academy next year. And her and her team are working on it, and they're hoping to get her a seat. They're just trying to figure out where. And that's been her aim since she started racing single seaters. So hopefully we'll see her on the grid next year, because yeah, there are a few spaces. Because a few people are like have done their 2 seasons. So and in F1 Academy, for those who don't know, you can only do 2 seasons and then you have to leave the
and there's an age limit that hit Carrie Schreiner as well. So Carrie Schreiner is the German racing driver, and this is her second season, but she also already turned 26, and the age limit of F1 Academy is 25.
Yeah. So, and I think Hamda Alkabezi, she's had this is her second season, so she'll be leaving. I don't know who else is in their second season. I can't remember.
Bianca's in the second season.
Oh yeah, true. But yeah, so there's basically going to be quite a few spaces across the grid. So we'll have some new talent coming in there. But I hope Alicia does get a seat, because I think she proved that she...
Chambers is also the only one who has a fixed seat. She's the only one that was already confirmed again.
Oh yeah. I wonder if anyone's going to move around. I wonder. I do like I'm really enjoying the F1 Academy this year. I think it's been really good. And obviously now it's a GB3 seat that they get as a reward, which I think is a kind of a better prize than a Freca seat. And I think it's really interesting because Abby was saying in her interview, she was talking to, I think it was Jensen and Ted and stuff all before the race. She was talking to them and she was saying that actually like this season was everything to her, because if she didn't win, she didn't, like, that was going to be the end of her racing career. She needed that like GB3 support, because otherwise she didn't have the funds to keep herself in like higher tiered racing, which I think is insane, because you forget that, like, especially with female drivers, because it's harder for them to get sponsorships, like, you forget how important something like F1 Academy is for them, and winning F1 Academy is for them. So yeah, like, if we see Abby pulling in F2 one day, or F3 one day, she never would have been there if she hadn't won F1 Academy, because those seats are vital.
I don't know if you just saw my facial expressions.
I did. What's happened?
And I hate to break this because I really love talking about the F1 Academy.
Oh no.
But before we continue on any more racing, there's one big rumor that's currently breaking in the F1 world, and that is Esteban Ocon leaving Alpine early to give his seat to Jack Doohan for Abu Dhabi. And I think you just saw the tweet as well, didn't you?
I did just see this. I did just see the tweet, yeah.
And it says something, because if we put something up, then there's definitely fuel.
Oh my god, this is actually insane. This is actually crazy. Like, I get why Alpine would want to do this, because it's a really good opportunity to just get Doohan in the car without any, like, consequences. But also, like, is it necessary? You know, like, there is one race left, and you are also still fighting for the constructors. Like, I know they've gained some points on Haas, but, like, it's still kind of close. Um, so that's kind of crazy.
I don't know what to say.
Oh, okay, wait. They explained
It's a
it on
full
Sky.
developing story, okay, guys.
They
It's a full
they
developing
explained
story.
it. Yeah, they explained it on Sky apparently. Ocon wants to test with Haas, so he struck an agreement with Alpine that says if he leaves early to like let do and race, then he can go start testing with Haas.
What?
So that's why apparently he's doing it. Apparently they explained it on Sky. Which kind of makes sense to me because he wants to make sure he's in the best possible place for next season. But kind of insane still. Literally what? Literally what?
Well, you heard it here, folks. You heard it here. It's truly chaos in the paddock.
It really is.
I think my podcast name brought a ton of luck to this season.
I would honestly, like, someone needs to study this season because the amount of, like, rookies who have moved up into seats and, like, drivers that have been changed and, like, massive announcements that have come out, I am actually traumatized by that, like, breaking news Formula One graphic. I never want to see it again. I'm actually, like, I literally can't do it. I can't. I want to know if, oh my god, Max is slandering George Russell. Should we talk about this? I've just seen Max said in an interview, I've lost all respect for him. He's always polite in front of the cameras, but in person he's completely different. I don't want anything to do with him.
When did this happen? Just now.
22 minutes ago via Viaplay. What? Max, why? Like, but also why? Because they haven't had any massive incidents. Like, why is he like? It's not like they just crashed or something. Like, why is he? Why is he beefing with George? What? I need someone. Why the sudden outburst? Oh, I think this is regarding the penalty, like his grid drop penalty. Someone said apparently that he was asked about the meeting with the FIA after qualifying. And that's when he said that.
They're also concerned about each other. They should be concerned about the FIA as a whole because you mentioned it earlier. Like, the whole race today was in shambles because of certain decisions that the FIA have made. I mean, like I said, Rui Marquez joined us in Las Vegas. Funny enough, I already met him a week beforehand because he was the race director in Macau. So I was able to actually meet him and I was like, oh yeah, this is my first time covering the Macau GP. It's my home race. You know, I had a good conversation with him and I'm like, oh, what a lovely man. And then we move on to today and I'm like, excuse my language, but like, what the fuck?
It actually,
because
like,
I saw the punctures happen and I was screaming because I was like, Carlos, no! Lewis, no! And then, like, I was jumping up and down. I realized it was debris. I thought they had a collision first. I really thought they had a collision with each other.
honestly, so did I. Also, it was really weird. My, like, video broadcast was ahead of the commentators, like, briefly. So I saw, like, it was really weird. Like, I saw Lewis with a puncture, and I was like, why are they still talking about, like, other stuff? Like, why aren't they talking about the fact that Lewis has a puncture right now on my screen? And then they were like, oh, there's a puncture, and I was like, oh, I don't know what's happened here, but they've, like, my, like, video broadcast and, like, audio had, like, unsynced itself. So it was really weird. So I had to, like, wait until a perfect moment to quickly turn it off and, like, reload it. But I was like, they are way too calm about Lewis, like, driving around with a puncture right now. But that was insane. I just was really confused. I was like, what's happened? I was like, what am I watching right now?
Where did they end up finishing? So Hamilton finished in 12th and Carlos...
Sainz did pretty well. Sainz did pretty well to recover it.
Oh, yeah. He was able to pit in time. Like, he was literally, like...
Yeah, he wasn't far from the pit lane.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of DNFs.
He
Oh, I feel
managed
bad
to,
for
yeah, like even though he had a puncture, he managed to keep the car like on the road and going at like a fairly normal speed, so he didn't lose too much time. Whereas like Hamilton was literally driving round like a madman trying to get back to the pits. So by the time he pit, it was
Hamilton
kind
was
of
not having it today. He was genuinely asking to just retire the car, and they had to tell him to, we're racers. We race to the finish.
it's really weird because I feel like this season has been the first time we've ever seen Lewis like this. And especially in the last few rounds, I mean, there were literally rumours after Brazil that he wasn't going to come back. And he said himself that he didn't want to come back after Brazil. Like, it's not even that it was rumours. He literally was like, I was considering not turning up. And they're like, even Crofty and Jensen, I'm pretty sure this is where you were leading. Even like Jensen and Crofty were talking about like, would Lewis even race in Abu Dhabi? Like, what if he just decides like this is it for him? And like Jensen was saying that he hopes Lewis comes back like for Abu Dhabi to race because he thinks like that this isn't the way he wants Lewis to like leave Mercedes. But equally, like if he has another bad weekend, that's not going to be the way he wants to leave Mercedes either. So, and I don't think Abu Dhabi is going to be any better for the Merc car. And the current issues that he has with it aren't going to suddenly fix themselves. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen
You know
there.
who I think deserves not to come back? Perez.
Oh my god. Oh my god, Sergio Perez, please. I want to root for you. I want to be able to say something nice about you, Sergio. Please. Give me a reason. Give me a reason to justify Red Bull's decision to keep you. It's actually so bad. Like this whole weekend, I've this whole weekend, I made a TikTok video about this because if I was Sergio Perez, I would be mortified. Like, before this weekend, he was like, guys, it's okay. In these last two rounds, I'm gonna turn it around. Just you wait and see. Out in SQ1. 20th in the sprint race. Out in the feature race. I think, did he make it into Q2? I'm pretty sure he did. I think he made it into the
Yeah. He was out. Like, oh no, I don't know about qualifying yesterday because
qualifying yesterday, not everything else. But then he was out in the race anyway, so it doesn't matter. Like, he has had like the worst weekend, and it just feels like that's every weekend for him. And granted, like, his replacements weren't doing much better in the sprint race. Like, they were all 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th. But they're also in Williams and RBs. You're in a Red Bull, babe. The Red Bull that then won the race this Sunday, you know? Like, okay, sure, the Red Bull might not be as good as it used to be, and this might be showing just how good Max is, but I don't think it's that big of a gap. I don't think the Red Bull is so bad and Max is so insane that if you put any other driver in the car, they'd also be last and crashing out. You know? I don't think it's that bad. But no, apparently they're going to have a discussion about Perez's future after Abu Dhabi, so we'll see what happens.
I'm pretty sure they've been having it all season long. Because essentially Max won all by himself. He didn't have a teammate to help him. The constructors is definitely being lost because Max cannot shoulder everything, especially not in the car that he was this season.
Red Bull would be in the same place in the constructors right now without Perez's points as they would be with them. So he's literally been useless to the team. And I said this last year when Red Bull still managed to get the constructors. I said it'll be a difference. Like, Perez can perform badly all he likes as long as Red Bull still win the drivers and constructors. As long as Max can pick up the slack, it doesn't matter where Perez finishes. But now that they're like losing, not just coming second in the constructors, coming third in the constructors, like, that's then enough money that Red Bull are losing that, okay, well, now is Sergio Perez's sponsorship money useless because the offset that you're getting. So it just depends. Like, I think they'd be insane to keep him for another season. I think I'd cry if they keep him for another season.
They can have a break and have a Kit Kat.
Sergio Perez needs a break to have a Kit Kat. Literally, someone said him going out in Q1 is the like best ad for Kit Kat ever because he just always is taking a break.
It's just like, have a break, have a Kit Kat. Maybe that's why they chose to sponsor him.
Imagine.
And
I
it's
feel
like,
so
I
bad.
would never. I feel so bad for saying that. But at this point, I'm seeing a lot of my friends who are Checo Perez fans like text me in our groups every single week. Like, is this man serious? How did this happen? What is going on? And I'm like, I would love to tell you what's going on, but I really can't. Like, this is all in his head, and I think Red Bull really have to make a good decision right now. And I have to say, Ralf Schumacher, I was watching the German broadcast again, and he says, if I have to choose who is going to be in that seat next to Max Verstappen, I know that Yuki Tsunoda would be ready, but at this point, he's been in the game so long, he should have been considered earlier. And he would rather take a young driver that you can mold. So that would be, and he said, Colapinto and Lawson.
If I was Red Bull, I would put Lawson into the Red Bull and Colapinto with Yuki in the RB till Yuki's contract's over. And then realistically, like, Yuki's going to go somewhere else, isn't he?
I
But
see Yuki and Aston Martin.
that's what I see too. I think the Honda deal makes that his most likely option. But I agree. I think Yuki's right when he says every teammate they've put him up against, he's beaten. And I think he's right in the fact that he should be in the conversation more than he is. But Red Bull make it clear time and time again that he's not really in that discussion as much as he should be, and he's not seriously being considered in the same way that others are. And I think even if Red Bull wanted to make a really risky decision, I still wouldn't put in their minds, if I was them with their mindset currently, you think, okay, well, after Yuki goes, then you just put Isaac Hadjar in the RB with Colapinto or whoever else is there.
I think Hadjar and Colapinto would make a fair duo.
I think they would. Yeah, I mean, I think they would. Like, that's the end of my statement there. I was gonna comment, and then I was like, actually, I don't have any disagreement with that. I think they would, full stop. I think they're both interesting personalities, and they're both very different personalities in a race car. So it would be interesting to see how that would play out. Another example of a Williams junior driver and a Red Bull junior driver. But I think they're both very talented, so it'd be nice to see. I also wish, pray, hope that Pepe Marti had a better F2 season, because his F2 season has been horrendous. On the sprint race, he didn't even start the race because his car had an issue, so he literally didn't even pull up to the grid. And I want him to be considered so badly because he's also.
I saw that message. I saw you write that in the group, and I was like, "What is going on?"
I don't even know what his issue was, but he didn't even start. He didn't even get onto the grid. He watched the whole race from the pit lane, which was so fun for me. But I really want him to do better. I think he's going to stay in F2 next year, I'd assume. So I'm hoping he has a better season, because he's been incredibly unlucky. And you've seen when he hasn't had bad luck, he's had incredible performances. So I want him to also get himself in that conversation for a future Red Bull seat, because I think he deserves it. And I will always support Pepe Marti. He can do no wrong.
It's like me with Joshua Dirksen. He can do no wrong.
See, I'm a Joshua Dirksen fan when he's not fighting one of my other favourite F2 drivers. I can't. I think he was.
So Tiana is a Gabriel Bortoleto fan. My driver isn't even. JMC isn't even in a seat right now.
Oh, actual heartbreak. I miss him.
I know. So I have Dirksen. I literally have Dirksen and maybe Ollie Goethe.
I'm obviously a Behrman girl. But to be fair,
your boy has an F1 seat. What
yeah,
happened to me?
I'm golden. I don't think I enjoy watching F2 so much now, because I no longer have to worry about his results impacting his future. But I will say, I'm a part of the reason I'm excited for the next season is because Luke Browning, love him so much. Dino Boganovic, love him so much. There's a lot of drivers staying on the grid who were on the grid this year that I'm really excited to see. I don't know if he will, but I talked about this in my video when this news first came out, but I don't know if Paul's going to do another F2 season, because obviously now that he's the Alpine reserve, there's the chance he's just going to do a Jack Doohan and just stay reserve driver and not do any racing. But equally, because he's now an Alpine driver, will they help fund an F2 season? Because I would really like to see him do another F2 season.
I think he could win.
I think he could. I think he could easily, if the team's as good as they have been this year, which there's no reason why they wouldn't be, I think he easily could win it. So that's why I kind of want him to do it again. So yeah, there's quite a few drivers who I'd like to see do another season, because this season as well, people forget, because obviously the new cars were brought in, teams have been so temperamental. There have been a lot of engine issues. There have been a lot of inconsistencies. Teams that should be really good have been nowhere. So I think next year it's going to be a lot more consistent, and it's going to be a lot more driver skill based than like luck and consistency. So I'm looking forward to it, basically.
What else? Lando. What? We need to touch on that as well.
Lando and his stop and go penalty. Can I say that I laughed? Can I say, is that a bad thing? I laughed when they announced the stop and go.
I have a picture of me like being like, because I was like, let's do like live reactions for this, because I thought about making a TikTok comeback for a second, but then I ended up just.
I love that.
At this point, like, that was me.
I can't lie, like, I straight up giggled, but then like I giggled because of how ridiculous it was. Like I said this earlier, I think he deserved a penalty, but a stop and go is insane. Like, we never see stop and goes anymore. Like, what are we doing? But I also found it just really funny because obviously I'm a Ferrari fan. I want Ferrari to win the constructors, so seeing like McLaren's get penalised is really funny for me. And I was like, this is insane. The FIA were being so mean this weekend to like everyone for like no good reason. And it was wild. But you know what? To fight back, for him to fight back and then get into the points, impressive. So.
Do you think it was fair?
I don't think a stop and go was fair. I think he should have had a 5 or a 10-second penalty. Because at the end of the day, like, regardless of the conditions of the FIA around the whole yellow flag situation, in a yellow flag situation, you have to lift. If you don't lift, like, it is a safety issue, and like, safety is the most important. And you can go, oh yeah, but it was just a mirror and he didn't hit it or whatever, but you have to do it. Like, there could have been a car on the road with a yellow flag, and if a driver doesn't lift and then they crash into it and then something else happens, that's like on that driver. So you have to stay consistent with your harshness on safety. But I think a stop and go was insane, because that then ends up being like a 30-second like penalty instead of like a 10-second.
My favorite tweet is what you told me earlier with what I sent you earlier with like the list of things that happened in Qatar, and the guy was literally like, yeah, race control is incompetent.
Yeah, it felt like just a mess, to be honest.
I thought it was gonna be like a track limit mess like what we had last season, because last season I made a TikTok about a drinking game. Like, I literally just made a drinking game for Qatar, and I was like, take a shot for every time deleted, every time, you know, someone gets the track limits, whatever. And everyone found that so funny because that was the main issue. But now it's like, race control, where were you? And then, you know, they weren't there for a hot minute, and then all of a sudden they show up and they're like, oh yeah, we're boss. And I have to admit, and this is gonna be, I guess, a hot take that maybe many could agree on. So if you guys listen and want to talk to us about it, you know, just DM us on our social media. I have a feeling that Mohammed Ben Sulayem is currently in a power trip.
Oh, for sure. He's been in a power trip for for recent times. Like, the fact that he thinks that drivers don't need to know when they're making important personnel changes within the FIA is insane to me. I think it almost feels like, instead of like a governing body and a body that is supposed to work with drivers to create safe conditions and keep races fair and safe, he wants the FIA to be a controlling body and like one that just makes decisions, and sorry if the drivers don't like it, like, tough luck. And actually, I'm hoping that this is where the Drivers' Association will come into play. Because, I mean, even George, like, expressed his disappointment that they haven't heard anything from the FIA about the statement they put out. And apparently they haven't had a response from the FIA at all, which is, like, crazy to me. Like, these are your drivers. They're the reason people are watching this sport. The people aren't watching the sport because of the FIA. In fact, a lot of people, I guarantee, would probably stop watching the sport because of the FIA, famously. So it, like, makes no sense to me, this, like, unwillingness to work with the drivers. Like, that's kind of what it feels like from Ben Slime, which I think is, like, just, yeah, it really annoys me.
I think it's quite concerning because, I mean, I've met him a couple of times now, and, you know, I never really had, like, a problem. But now, like, I think it's quite evident what's going on, and it's just really crazy to me that all of a sudden, you know, you have these people being fired or being let go all of a sudden, and to say that, oh yeah, the workload is different now. I think that was, like, the reasoning behind it. I mean, don't quote me on this, but I read that he let go of the F2 race director, for example, because the workload can be handled by one person now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, have you seen this weekend? Have you looked at all of that? You really think, like, you know, Rui Marquez is probably leaving the paddock right now with the biggest iPad.
But also, actually, that's actually such a good point, because also, famously, F2 is, like, one of the worst series for, like, penalties coming out. Like, think about this season and how many times we've had, like, penalties that have changed the race winner come out 3 hours after the race.
I remember that because we would do the press conferences and we'd be like, oh,
it's happened,
oh,
like,
yeah.
multiple times. Like, I made a video about it, like, earlier this
we'd
season.
all be like, oh, for fuck's sake. Like,
yeah. Like, and it hasn't just happened once. I think it's happened, like, literally, like, 3 or 4 times. Like, Richard Verschoor should be way further ahead this season than he is, because the amount of times he's been demoted from a race win or a podium this season has been insane. And I think, like, you can't say the workload is enough for one person, because it clearly isn't, because this series is not functioning as it should. And I mean, like, race start penalties, like, things that were being investigated from the race start, from lap 1, were not being announced until hours after the race ends. And, like, that is a failing of the FIA.
I would be so annoyed at those, because then we'd have to go back and, like, either update the articles or, like,
so annoying.
Write a new one, and we would be so tired. I remember how tiring it was. I was so happy when F3 ended. Like, I love Formula 3, but that was even more carnage. It was like chaos, a riot, and then the apocalypse.
It's also when you have, like, weekends where you have, like, F1, F2, and F3 on, because they're all so, like, action-packed and chaotic that, like, one thing happens in one of them, it affects, like, the whole weekend, you know? Mm-hmm. It is so stressful when they're all 3 are going at the same time. But yeah, like, we had so many instances like that. So in my eyes, for, like, the FIA to be like, oh, we're doing our work so well, we don't need 2 people doing this job. It's like, well, clearly you're not. Like, you're just lying. Like, are we looking at the same thing?
That's what I thought, because, you know, what really got to me was when I was in Macau. I don't know if I think I told all of you, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm reporting on this race and we've had 7 red flags, and now the FIA had called, like, a mandatory meeting to, like, speak to the boys about their driving, because 7 red flags is absolutely insane.
Crazy, even for Macau.
I was like, okay, so Rui is gonna come and do this, but I have a feeling I don't want to put out false information, because this is genuinely just an opinion. So FIA, please do not come for me. People are allowed to have their own opinions. I feel like he's a puppet.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I just feel like there are a lot of issues at the moment that aren't all Salome's fault. I think there are some, like, foundational issues within how the FIA functions that need to be fixed. Because you even see it with the stewards. Like, the whole bias of stewards is real, and I don't think you can argue with that because you see harsher penalties towards some drivers than others, and that often does correlate to who the stewards are that weekend. And do I think it's always as extreme as some people make out? No. I don't think certain stewards have vendettas against drivers that they're trying to fulfill. But I do think that there should be a better way of vetting stewards. If there are articles of you slagging off a driver before you were a steward, should you be allowed to be a steward? Because if you clearly have like a bias against that driver, does that put you in the best position to make these decisions impartially? No. And I think you can see that and that playing out in the lack of consistency that we see from the FIA. You can see those foundational issues that need to be fixed in how it works, how it makes decisions, how those decisions are then built upon and repeated. And okay, well, if Lando gets a stop and go for racing under, like, not slowing down under a yellow flag, watch the next race happen and someone only gets a 5-second penalty. Like, those are the sort of inconsistencies we see, and that's what needs to be fixed for me. That for me is a bigger issue than whatever like Ben Salim's doing. Like, I'd rather just have consistent penalty.
That was very clear today. I think this was the
Yeah.
race that showed it, and I'm kind of worried for Abu Dhabi. I'm worried for my mental health when I'm there. I'm worried for Tiana's mental health when she's there.
Yeah, she's there.
there.
I'm concerned for her with the F2 because if Isaac Hadjar wins and she's there with her Gabriele Bortoleto glasses, I'm afraid for what happens. Actually, I'm a little bit concerned. Although I will be laughing if Ferrari managed to get the constructors. And also, Charles Leclerc's only 7 points behind Lando now, so Charles Leclerc could also take the P2 in the
Maybe
drivers.
Lando should rethink what he. Oh yeah, maybe Lando should rethink giving the sprint to Oscar. But I think at this point, their concern is more on the constructors.
Yeah. I mean. And I think also, like, for Lando, this season has been a huge learning curve for him. And I think a lot of people have judged him a lot for this season, but I see this season for him very similar to the way I saw 2022 for Charles Leclerc. And a lot of people criticised Charles Leclerc for the way he handled 2022 and the mistakes he made. But this is a driver fighting for a championship for the first time ever in his career. There are going to be mistakes, and especially for Lando, there have been mistakes, and yeah, there have been, okay, maybe more than you'd expect, but he's also been in a car that has been trash. Like, at least Charles was in an okay car.
I remember that.
Lando has been in a tractor, and now he's suddenly racing against Max Verstappen wheel to wheel. Give the man a second to adjust. So I do give him, like, leeway for this season. If he kept making mistakes into, like, next season, if he's still championship contending, then you have to be like, okay, we need to fix that. But I think it's been an incredible season for him. I mean, he's gone from having no wins to, 3 now?
Lando no wins, that
honestly,
meme comes out, and then he wins Miami and was like...
Honestly, in the nicest way to him, that nickname was my favourite thing in the world, and it dying was the worst part of this season for me. Because not even just as a slander, nickname, I don't hate Lando by any means, but it was just such a good, slander nickname, you know? You rarely see drivers get, insult nicknames that work as well as Lando No-Wins did, and I really did enjoy it. But yeah, he's had an incredible season, 3 wins, however many pole positions he's got. He's had a great season. And I think also he's shown that he is stronger than Oscar still, because there were questions around that at points this season. And then it feels like Oscar's tailed off a bit. I feel like we've had a few more races where Oscar hasn't been able to keep up with the pace that Lando has. So that will be interesting as well into next season. But I think he's done really well, and I think this season can be one that he's proud of, even if he does look back on it a little bit salty. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens next year as well.
I'm excited for that. I think that next year is going to be another gift that is giving. Especially because we are mixing up the grid. I think that was the one thing that kind of bored me during the beginning of the season is that we were starting with the same grid, and that hasn't
But
happened
you
in a
regret that
while.
now.
I know. And
But
then
you
towards
regret
the
being
end,
bored
all
now.
of these mix-ups started to happen, like with Sanford and Logan having to leave, and I'm like, wait.
Literally, now there's been like 50 changes. I can't even keep up with who's in what
Actually, I'm
team.
gonna I'm gonna pull up my because I have my old notebook with me because it's full now, and I have my race predictions in here. Well, my season predictions in here.
Oh my god, I have my season
Okay.
predictions somewhere. I'm actually gonna see if I have mine still.
Yeah, no, nothing is gonna happen. So I have currently checked off. I have Max DNF, Logan gets replaced, Lando's first win, Carlos wins a GP, Monza Magic, a car burns, end of Monaco curse. The ones that still need to happen, which is not gonna happen. Actually, no, it will still happen. It could still happen. Checo gets replaced. Well, Albon on the podium is not happening anytime soon. Daniel on a pole can be removed because Daniel is out of a seat. Hulkenberg podium. Was I drunk writing that?
I think you
And
might have been.
Max and Checo crash into each other.
Do you wanna? I've also got my preseason predictions that I made. And I'm actually can't lie, I've done pretty well here. I've actually slayed this. This shows how much delusion pays off, guys. Because when I wrote these, people were like, "That's so silly. Why did you write that?" And now I'm looking really smart. So mine were World Drivers' Champion Max. I thought Red Bull would still get the constructors, but I thought it would be really close. I was wrong on that. My top three was Max, Charles, and Lewis. Sorry, Lando, did not expect that. My most improved team was Racing Bulls. My most surprising driver change, I thought that Ollie Behrman was going to be announced to go to Haas. I was right. Delusion works again. Who will get their first win? Lando Norris. I was right. Best of the rest, I thought would be Aston Martin. Aston, please. My biggest delusion was Charles Leclerc wins Monaco. So, guys, basically my biggest delusion
and we
was...
were there. We were there. We were in the same place.
Not only was my biggest delusion right, but I was there to witness it. And then my best of the rest driver was Alex Albon, but sorry, Alex, you kind of haven't done that. Yeah. But yeah, so those were my preseason predictions.
The thing is, with Alex Albon, Red Bull saw something in him, and I think if Red Bull sees something in you, that means something. I just think he hasn't been able to show it in the Williams, and it's very difficult if your teammates keep on, accidentally yeeting the car into the air, into the wall, whatever, or, you fall victim to the back of the grid. So I think it's going to be a different experience with Carlos Sainz with him. And I know people keep on saying that Carlos Sainz isn't a team player. And I'm not happy with his performance last week as well. Like that, I agree with that. It just wasn't it. I think what he did was absolutely dangerous as well. And he should have gotten a penalty for that.
I also think with Carlos, he doesn't listen to team orders sometimes and he can not be a team player, but Williams is going to be a very different dynamic to Ferrari. Like, when you're at a top team, and a top team like Ferrari who have Charles Leclerc, who is their child and they love and is, worshipped like a god, and you're not treated the same way. And I think... I disagree with people being like, oh, Ferrari have treated Carlos badly. I don't think they've treated him badly, but Charles is the future of that team. They're right to prioritise him when they do. And I don't even think they do that much. I think they should prioritise him more than they have, actually. But I understand why he's made the decisions he has, especially this season. But Williams is going to be such a different dynamic. Literally look at the way James Vowles talks about Carlos Sainz. That is a man who is going to be cherished at Williams. He's going to be treated like the god because he's the, front team driver coming down to, lowly Williams to, drag them back to the front. I don't think there's going to be a case of, bad teammate behaviour between the two, because when you're at a bottom team or, a lower grid team, you're just working together to get through the weekend, you're working together to bring that team to a better place. And I think Alex isn't really teammate fighting behaviour either.
I don't think so. I think he should be. But I think Sainz and Alex Albon can learn a lot from each other. I think this is the
Yeah.
step that Sainz needs to maybe become a team player again. I'm not saying that he always wasn't a team player, because if you look at his time with McLaren, I keep on saying this, and I feel like he should not have left McLaren.
I feel like being at Ferrari made him more selfish, but not necessarily always in a good way. Like, I think as a driver, it's good to be selfish to an extent, and I think Charles needs a bit more of this, and Carlos needs a bit less of this. You know, like that. I think Charles goes with the team too much, and sometimes he'll like call out his own strategies, and the team will go, "No, we think this," and he'll do what the team thinks. Or if the team say this team orders, even if he doesn't agree, he'll do it. When I think he shouldn't, and I think Carlos does too much of the opposite. Of if he thinks something, he does it, and if the team says something, he doesn't do it. So I think actually Alex might be the balance to him a little bit.
But I have to say that whenever Carlos did play by his own rules, it turned out well. So he's not.
Yes, but
he's not.
I think that is partially. I think it's partially because Charles does what the team says as well. Because if the team say team orders and Carlos ignores them, Charles isn't then gonna also like ignore them. Like Charles still listens to what the team says. But I agree, like when he has done, and this season I think was very vital for him to do what he wanted, because it was about him getting a seat on the grid somewhere where he wanted to be. Mm-hmm. And I think I have a lot less like annoyance towards him because of it this season, because I can understand, like, why would you obey team orders for a team you're not going to be at next year? Like, what happens with this team next year doesn't affect you as much as it does Charles Leclerc. Like, that makes sense to me. You have to put yourself in the best position for your future as a driver without a seat next season. So that makes sense to me. I don't hate on him too much for it. Like I understand why he does it. But I hope obviously when he's at Williams with a long-term contract, he won't need to make those decisions as much, you know.
I'm interested to see what the exit clause is on that long-term contract. That's something
I really want to know. I want to know what is in that exit clause so badly, because obviously it's been like hinted at that there's a clause that he can go to a higher team if he wants to. But I need to know what the exact like exit clauses is, like what requirement.
The one thing that bothers me is the fact that people have been saying, oh, if Christian Horner didn't even want you in his team or things like that. I mean, Toto wanted Antonelli from the get-go. That was like 100%. Like you said, Aston Martin are going to keep Fernando and Lance for as long as Lance wants to be there. So where could he have gone? He's not going to go to Sauber or Audi.
This is what I think about a lot, and I think my thing with Red Bull is, I think Sainz doesn't fit the criteria of what Red Bull want from a second driver at the moment, for me. And I think I've explained this multiple times in like videos in the past. So I didn't really see Red Bull as like a choice for him. I didn't really see Mercedes as a choice because I knew that they wanted like Antonelli, because Antonelli was all they talked about. And yeah, like it was a weird one, because it was like, oh, you feel like he should be in the discussions, but it just seemed like all these teams had their own like plans sorted out. And I think that kind of was a detriment to Carlos from the unexpected nature of Lewis to Ferrari. Like teams hadn't expected that to happen, so they hadn't planned for if a driver like Carlos Sainz was available. Whereas now, in the next few seasons, will we see Aston going, okay, well, if Fernando's going to retire, do we want to bring in a driver like Carlos? Because, I mean, Fernando said that his contract that he's signed now will be his last one. How true that is for Fernando Alonso.
Oh my God, he keeps on coming back, so I don't really, hold it,
I don't hold it too high, but, theoretically, say that's true. Say he retires in, 2026, maybe 2027, say that then happens, or say Max retires after his contract, then Red Bull are left with a huge, gaping hole of talent that they'll be wanting to replace with the next Max Verstappen. So do they then decide to chuck a rookie in the car, and do they want a talented like midfield driver or like top tier driver to
And
coach
Sainz
him?
is a Red Bull Junior, for God's sake. You can tell he is a Red Bull Junior. Just
Yeah,
look at
you
the
can
way
tell he's
he,
very
like, that's why he's fire. That's why he's chilly, because he was a Red Bull Junior.
Yeah. But yeah, so I think there are options for him to move to top teams like in the next few years. But I want to know what those exit clauses are. I want to know which teams he's allowed to go to, what are the conditions that he can go to them. Like, what did
He'll
James
just be a
Vowles give up just
fly.
to get him for a season, you know?
To be a fly on that wall
Oh my god,
during
I
those flirting
literally...
sessions, as we like to call them. I
The
mean,
fucking
I showed you the quotes. Like,
courting
that
that
was
went on there was actually insane. The way James Vowles talked about Carlos Sainz. Get yourself a man who talks about you the way James Vowles talks about Carlos Sainz.
is my life's motto now after like hearing all of that.
Literally. Literally,
But
it's
how do you feel about it being the last race next week?
I don't know, like, I'm weirdly mixed emotions. Like, I'm upset because I think this season's been obviously like one of the best seasons we've had in years. Like the fighting, the team drama, the driver changes, like all of it has been so good. But equally for me, this season has felt like it's been 5 years long, and I'm actually quite excited for a break. And I'm also excited for a reset because like now that the championship is won, or like the drivers' championship's been won, like I'm like let's Ferrari try again, you know? Take two, except it's like take
It wasn't
2000.
as bad as last season's pain for you and me.
It really wasn't. So I'm thankful for that. And we've had some like really, really great moments this season as well. Like Lewis winning Silverstone, Charles Leclerc winning Monza and Monaco. Like we've had some really heartfelt wins, like Lando's first win, Oscar's first and second win. Like we've had all these moments that I think have been like really just reminded me why I love this sport so much, which I've really enjoyed. But also, I'm kind of like eager to get to next season with all the new rookies coming in, because we all know how much I love F2 and F3 and how much I love my rookies and my junior drivers, and literally so many of my faves are going to be in seats next season. So I'm really, really excited for next year, and I'm like kind of like eagerly awaiting it. So mixed emotions from me, I think.
I have to say it's very mixed emotions for me too, because this year was my first full season actually working as well. So
Mm.
it's very sentimental because I didn't just do F1, it was also FE, and now that's starting up again. And it's been like an up and down roller coaster, like you said, with Lando's first win, and me, I was crying right here because I opted not to go to Miami, and I was like, I'm not gonna do that. And to see him actually, the first time I saw him win was in Sandford.
Mm.
So
Oh
I
yeah.
was there, and for me, like, it kind of felt like the first time he won as well. And I mean, you and I were in Monaco, we were in tears. We were very happy for waterproof mascara at that point. Like, I think that's a
Honestly.
moment that I will never forget, because even though we didn't have time to see each other, like it was like something we shared because we were on the same ground seeing the same
Yeah.
thing happening right in front of us. So that for me is like
Yeah.
an absolute highlight as well. And
Us
I'm
doing
like,
London E3 as well. Can't forget about that.
oh yeah, that's for sure. Like it's always so funny because the creator community, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a content create like a full-time content creator, because obviously like I mainly do journalism and PR, and I do the occasional content because I don't know what to post on TikTok. Like I have to be
Mm.
honest. I just don't know what to do on there except for go live, and yeah, that's what I do the best. And I don't always have the time to be doing like breaking news videos, which is why I opt to tip you guys off. But it's a very small community that kind of accumulated together, and sometimes when we do see each other in person, it's so weird.
It really
Because
is.
it feels like a blind date or like a Tinder date.
It really does. That's actually a very apt way of explaining it. It like feels like you're meeting someone. It's like because you're meeting someone who you've only talked to online, really. And even though we see each other's faces and like we've talked like on like equivalent of FaceTime, I guess, you still haven't like met in person. So it's very jarring. It's very strange.
I think the day that, let's say, we will meet Claire or we'll see Anna or Mari, it's gonna be like the weirdest day in the whole entire world, because then we're gonna be standing in front of each other and we're like, what now?
What
What do we do
next?
next?
Yeah, that'll be
Where do we
really
go for
strange.
dinner? What do we
I
do?
think we should try and get everyone at the London pre-final. That's my
I have to
thoughts.
get you here. The Christmas market opened, Fleur. The
Oh my
Christmas market
god.
opened.
I need to
So
look
the
at flights.
podcast is hearing this. We need to get Fleur to Germany for the
I
Christmas
need to
market
sack off
before it
uni and
closes
go to
out.
Germany instead. Screw my uni
Exactly.
assignments. I need to be in Germany, basically.
Listen, it's an hour's flight.
Exactly. Well, it's a little bit longer because I have to go from where I am in the UK to a big UK airport, and then I have to fly out of a UK airport. But it's still only like 3 hours. It's
That's
not
not
too
too
bad.
bad. Yeah.
But yeah, it's just figuring out when. I actually do need to look at flights to see if it's plausible for me in the next few weeks. Because I want to go.
But
I
you're
keep
always
complaining about being
welcome.
in
I
the
always say
UK.
everyone is always welcome here. I think it's important that, with motorsport, you're either so busy that you don't have time for your friends or family, or when you do have time, you're just in a different location because it just does not make sense to come back. I choose to come back because I love my home. And I don't like, I mean, I like having my own space. I think that's why I choose to come back, even though it's very, it's expensive and not sustainable to always be back. I mean, look, if I switch, like if I put my camera, you can see, well, my
The
ring light,
suitcases.
the suitcases. The blue one is new because I went back home to Hong Kong and for some reason needed another suitcase. Shopping. I had to
I
put
just
everything in there, like that I like bought that was new.
I love it because when I like packed up for uni, the first things I packed were my suitcase and my passport, just so I knew that I had them with me in case I wanted to go abroad. The need to leave the country is so strong.
I know. I think because you had like a really good hot girl summer as well.
It's
You were
because
everywhere.
I had like a whole year of like traveling and like having no responsibilities really beyond the responsibilities that I gave myself, like doing motorsport journalism, which was something I enjoyed. So now having like a weekly schedule and being like, oh, I can't just up and leave. Like I actually have to like schedule this and figure out what I'll miss. Like I can't just pack my bag and go. Like I don't like that feeling. I
It's
want
the
to.
beauty of the field, though.
It
You
is,
have
and
to
it's
admit,
nice
like,
the second I leave uni, I will have that ability again, and I'm thinking about that, and I'll have a degree. So
and that's why I'm dreading, like, so for the chaos fans listening to this, I'm actually gonna be going back to uni, and if I decide to continue with the plan to go to London for my master's, I actually have to give up working because I am not allowed to work freelance when I'm in the UK on a student visa.
are you not?
Yeah, I'm not.
I
I'm
didn't
only
know
allowed to
that.
work 20 hours a week, and I'd have to work like for like, like a normal student job, which is fine because I did that when I was a student as well. Like
Yeah,
I was like, screw this. I made like the decision, for example, to work at Lush because I earned a lot more money than my friends working like marketing student jobs. Like they were earning like £600 a month, and I was leaving with like 1,000 a month. I'm like,
cleaning
sorry,
up.
guys. Yeah, because I think something I learned was like cherishing like the little moments I have, especially because I was always so busy. And I started motorsport journalism whilst writing my thesis. Like that's when I started doing it like almost full time and taking on clients and doing the PR stuff. And that was so random of me, but it happened and I did it, and I'm very thankful that it did. And now that this season is closing, I'm like taking in everything I learned, and I'm like, okay, I need to do like a better schedule. I need to plan this more. I need to, figure some things out. And to give all of that up to do your master's is kind of pushing me towards studying in Monaco, which also isn't that bad because that means you get to visit me in the south of France.
Yeah, literally either way. To be fair, it's probably easier for me to get to you in Monaco than it is for me to get to you in London from where I am. Because it's like a 5 hour, I mean, it's one train, but it's like a 5.5 hour train from me into London right now. Whereas it's a 3 hour plane journey for me to get to like Nice. So then I could just get on, jump on a train and go to Monaco. Um, so
See, that's something everyone is gonna do when I'm there. That's like the most funny thing. Is like everybody's gonna be there in car spot. Like, oh, who's your neighbor? I'm not gonna tell you who my neighbor is. Can you imagine
nice.
if Charles ends up being my neighbor? I wouldn't leave my house.
I'll be around. I'll be visiting.
I will not leave. Like,
Hey, Chiara, I'm outside.
Imagine me
Hey, Chiara, I'm ringing your doorbell right now. I mean, I am an advocate for the south of France every single day of my life. I say consistently that the second I can, I will live there.
And it's cheaper. Me studying in Monaco is going to be cheaper than me moving to London.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. London is expensive. London makes me very upset with how expensive it is. Living down here in like the middle of nowhere, it's like so cheap in comparison to like even Cambridge and London. Like, it's so cheap. I love it. But yeah, I mean, I love the south of France. So the only benefit is if you're in London, I can come up for the weekend and we can go watch shows. So we can go see shows.
Fun.
Exactly. So, but yeah, I mean, I think if you have to give up doing freelancing, that makes life a lot more difficult. Because especially, like, that's just rough. Like, that's just rough. You don't want to have to do that.
It's a difficult thing to have to give up. Because then I mean, it's not that I'm not going to be going to races or anything. I can do that and stuff. And I spoke to my parents about this, and this is like a life lesson. This podcast turned into a life lesson, but that's fine because Qatar is the gift that keeps on giving, and this is the gift we're giving to you guys if you want to get into it. Having to give up doing that experience is gonna be tough because I have to think about the clients that I already have. Like, for example, like certain drivers that I do the PR for, right? I'm going to have to brief someone else to essentially be doing my job for 1 year. Because if I don't, I can switch to a graduate visa afterwards and try to find work in the UK. But I also only have 2 years to do that. So let's say I'm working for 2 years, but no one wants to sponsor my visa. I'd still have to leave anyways.
Yeah.
And I don't have to go through all of this hassle when I study in Monaco, because I don't even have to live in Monaco. I can. Do I want to? No. I told my parents, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to be living in Nice. Do I speak French? No. But I'm a fast learner. I speak 6 other languages. I'm pretty sure I can get the basics of French down at some point.
And in the south of France, they're like really nice with French speaking. Like, if you're struggling, they will speak English to you, and they're not like sassy about it the way Parisians are. They're very nice people.
That is very, very true. And there are a lot of international students, surprisingly, to be there.
That's so
and nice. I still think, even though people have like this thought of like, oh my gosh, Monaco, why are you doing this? Like, it's only rich people. It's actually not. People choose unis depending on the programs. And obviously what the unis can bring to the table. Both London and Monaco have equally good opportunities when it comes to connections. And my plan is to do my master's actually in luxury brand management, because I want to get into, the sponsorship stuff. I want to be able to help drivers, in the future, maybe to get sponsorships or work for the brands that sponsor F1, sponsor the drivers. Because I think that's fun. That's me bringing in my two worlds together. Because journalism, you can always go back to it, right? Yeah. That's something that's not going to leave. So it's tough decisions now that the season is closing, because I have to make my choice, in 3 months?
It is so stressful though. Like, even for me, picking unis was like difficult, because even though I was applying to do literally the same thing at all the unis I'd applied to, like trying to work out which one's going to give you the best opportunities, and like which one, like all the different factors of which one you're going to enjoy more, and like which environment is the best to be in, like which puts me in the best position to like take opportunities if they come along. And actually, like, at the end of the day, you've just got to pick the one that like your gut is like, I want to go to that one, which is a hard thing to say, but sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles, you know?
Hmm. And I guess on that note, that's all we have time for in chaos today, because we definitely have to sit and have a glass of wine after that race and also mentally prepare ourselves for the end of the season next week. But before we fully end, Fleur, do you have a prediction for next week?
For next week, I don't know. I have a delusional prediction,
Oh
and then
my
I have
god.
my like realistic prediction. So I'll give you both. My delusional prediction is that Charles Leclerc somehow clinches both the P2 in the Drivers' Championship and Ferrari get the constructors. And then my like realistic prediction is I could see Max doing quite well again in Abu Dhabi. I feel like McLaren will be quite strong. I think McLaren are going to get the constructors because Ferrari still have to outperform them by quite a margin, and I just don't see both Ferraris being up there with no McLarens up there either. I think Max will win again. I'm going to be positive for Max for end the season strong. You know, I think Lando will be on the podium. And yeah, I think Lando will keep P2 as much as I want Charles to get it because I think it'd be fun. And I think McLaren will get the constructors. Those are my end of season
That's
predictions.
also my prediction. So end of season prediction for me is McLaren get the constructors. Lando will keep P2. And I think podium order is going to be the driver championship order.
Yeah, I respect that. I would enjoy that. I'd enjoy that. A Max Lando Charles podium. I'd take that to end the
But
season.
my delusional prediction is that Bottas will be on the podium.
My delusional prediction is that Jack Doohan will get in the Alpine and drive it like a rocket ship and win his first race.
It doesn't sound like a delusional prediction for Jack to be on, because as we mentioned earlier, and
For him to be in the car,
so that the followers and the listeners can see my facial expression reading that tweet.
for him to be in the car is delusional, but for him to win his maiden race might be. But I'm still going to predict that anyway. I think he's going to do it. I think he's going to get in that car and just win. That's what I think. Imagine if that happened.
Yeah. But if you guys want to keep up with more chaos, the final race for F1 is next week. So stay tuned for our final podcast. Oh, well, not really final podcast, final race review podcast. Yeah. Because Formula E is starting on the same weekend. So it's going to be a big action-packed episode, I have to say. With Formula E, we're going to talk about the Formula 2 Championship, the F1 Academy, like final race. Exactly.
Everything.
Yeah, it's going to be a huge melting pot for motorsport next week. And very excited for it. Also already mentally stressed. I think, Fleur, you are also stressed considering you're going to be covering a fair amount too. But yeah. It's truly chaos, and this is why it's chaos in the paddock. So have a nice day, night, wherever you are, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.